Welcome
I
back
can.
to Faith Matters, which is a series of conversations we're having here at Eastminster Presbyterian Church in East Lansing. And our guest today is Dr. Emmanuel Yewah, who is professor of French and comparative cultural studies at Albion College. Dr. Yewah, thanks for joining us. We're glad you're here, Emmanuel.
Thank you for having me, Neil.
These conversations are a series of learning about the different ways that people from Eastminster have been formed in their faith. And if you wouldn't mind, would you share a little bit about your upbringing in Cameroon and your earliest memories as a child?
Okay, yeah, I was born in a small village in western part of Cameroon. And I was born in December, hence my name, Emmanuel, to go with the season. And I was with my parents, in Cameroon and in most African countries, children sometimes do not grow up with their own biological parents. So they go. So at about the age of 4, I left home to go live with my aunt in another small town. And that's where I started my elementary school. Yeah, and so when I started elementary school, and elementary school was for 6 years, 6 years in elementary school. And that's where I also started, getting to be responsible, some responsibilities as to, take care of. The boys would generally take care of fetching firewood for the home. The girls would fetch water and so on. And so that's where I started having some responsibilities. In addition to, fetching wood, we would they will give us some responsibilities as to, they will buy a ship, and then have you take care of that ship. Take care of that ship, which means in the morning before you go to school, you take that ship, go leave it somewhere to, to theater or to eat a grass. You have to tie it so it doesn't disappear, and then to eat grass. And then in the evening after classes, you go and bring the ship back home. So it was a question of, giving us some responsibilities at that young age. Yeah.
And in addition to those responsibilities, some of your early education, and somewhere soon in childhood, you fell in love with stories.
Yes, exactly, because in many African traditions, children are educated, or they don't read stories to children as they would do here. Rather, they tell stories. Parents or grandparents will tell stories to their kids or grandkids, especially after dinner. We'll all sit around the fire, and then our parents or grandparents will tell us stories. And those stories always had a moral ending. Was supposed to teach you about some specific thing in society that you shouldn't do. And as one of the stories that stands out, or there are many, but one of the stories that stand out is they are long. There are some of them that are very long, and for our purpose here, I'll choose the one that is relatively short. And this one is a story of two strangers who were going to visit a place. They were traveling, so they get to a village. They get to a village, it's already nightfall, so they had to look for a place to spend the night. And so they go to the chief of the village, who is usually the person you see when you get to a village. You have to report to the chief of the village so that they know that they are strangers in town. So when these two strangers arrived in that village, they went to the chief. The chief was very happy to see them and gave them, food and so on. And in almost every village, there's a guest house. So these strangers were offered the keys to the guest house to spend the night. But the The problem was that in that village, there were some very stringent laws against snoring. Stringent laws against snoring. So these two, they went to the guest house. As I started sleeping, one of them started snoring, and the other one he heard villagers already sharpening their machetes to come and kill them, and kill the one who was snoring. So what did he do? He decided to create a song. He sung this song so loudly that the rest of the villagers heard it, and so it drowned the snoring. And then so the villagers came, and instead of listening to the snoring, they were listening to the song and then started dancing. And even the chief came and joined in the dancing. So that was the night. The next morning, when they were about to leave, the chief said, "Oh, you guys made us have fun last night. We really enjoyed your presence. And as a result of that, I will give you a gift." So he gave them a gift, and that gift was money. And so as they're going away, the question becomes, who gets the largest share of the gift of the two? So one of them said, "If I didn't snore, then you would not have been able to invent that song or create that song that brought people here. And as a result of that, we had this money, this present." And then the other guy said, "If I had not invented or created the song, you would have been dead." So in a sense, who of the two do you think will get the greater share of money? And that's how the story ends. Is because this story, in this case, is one of dilemma stories. It ends in a dilemma. What do you do? So usually when you tell this story at the end, you ask the people, so how would you decide in this case? How would you decide on who to get the greater share? And that's how some of the stories ended, in an open question for us to discuss. And so that's one of my stories, the story that I remember most. I could go on with other stories, but I think this one would tell you something about. Again, this one is not much in terms of moral, but it's in terms of opening your mind to argumentation. How do you argue? How do you bring in facts? How do you convince people of your point of view? How would you put that? So, and those are the kind of discussion that will go on after such a story.
You paint such a great picture of that discussion circle around a campfire and listening to the stories being told and learning the discussion. At what point in childhood were you first presented with the scripture and Bible stories, and how was it first presented to you?
Yes, I was born into a Christian family. So my mom she was actually an elder in church for 35 years. And then so we were initiated into that fairly young. But when I went to my aunt, there was a break. There was a break because my aunt was not the one who go to church on Sundays. So for about 6 years, there was that break until when I finished elementary school and again moved to another city. I moved to another city to attend secondary school, which would be middle school and then high school together, actually middle school. So when I moved to that city, I was sent to a boarding school, and the school, it was a Presbyterian secondary school. So again, being Presbyterian, being sent to a Presbyterian secondary school, you see that my revival of the of that faith begins right there. And in the secondary school, we used to have, it was run as like a military academy, in the sense that everything was well structured. And into most of our studies, there was a study of the Bible. The study of the Bible was incorporated. It was one of the subjects that was studied basically every single day or every single week. We had courses in religious studies. So they will pick a chapter, a verse, pick a verse, pick a book, and then we'll study that for a while. And that's how it went on. But we studied it both as a spiritual text, but also as a piece of literature, which means it gave room for interpretation. So we're not bogged down into one specific meaning, set of meaning, but we had multiplicity of meanings based on what we read. But at the same time, the emphasis was, well, this is interpretation because we're treating the text as a piece of literature. At the same time, when we treat it as a piece of, as a Bible, as a spiritual text, there's a way of looking at that too. So that's the word of God and a word to be believed, to be accepted as it is, without much questioning. So we had all that growing up. And I was also a member of the Christian Youth Fellowship that was formed there. And so we had Bible studies, we had we had a choir, we had different activities to make us, and then we used to go also into the communities to talk about the Bible, to profess our faith, and so on. So in that way, for 5 years, I was right into it. So we had, I asked some of my classmates from 45 years ago, because we have a forum now with our former classmates. I asked them, say, how many prayers do you think we had per day, per typical day when we're in secondary school? And we counted about 8 prayers a day, which means when we got up in the morning, the first thing we had, we all had to do our chores. You had to do your chores because everybody had a portion of grass to clear. So you get up in the morning, you do that. After that, you take a shower, you line up, you have inspection, see if how you dress. We had shorts and blue shirt. See if everything was clean. Then we went to the chapel, had our first prayer in the morning. For every meal, before and after every meal, we had a prayer. Before and after the meal. So the prayer before the meal was to, thank the cooks and different people for having done this for you. And then at the end of the prayer, say, we thank God for having, and so on. So we had 3 meals, which meant 6 prayers before and after. And then at the end of the day, before we went to bed, we didn't have electricity, so we were using generators in that day. So at 9:30 every night, we have a final prayer for the day. And then 10 p.m., the lights will go off. The generator will be turned off, and that's time to go to bed. And the structure in that school really helped shaped who I am today. Basically, it's shaped who I am today. Because even to today, I cannot get up without making up my bed. And that's what I learned in that place, because you make up your bed and then there will be inspection of the dorm to see who did not make up the bed. If you didn't make it, you were punished. So instead of going out on Saturday, which was outing, they call it outing, where we'll go into the city, they let us go out and be free for the day. You will stay on campus and work and do some punishment. So everybody was, you had to do all those chores in order not to be punished, not to be kept in on Saturdays. Yeah.
So you did a great job sharing about the literature, the Bible as literature being presented, as well as a spiritual text, and as well as the many different times of day and ways praying before and after meals and so forth. What memories do you have from Cameroon of worship life?
Worship life in Cameroon, actually, it was, and I think I said this before somewhere, that, for a Cameroonian, or for many Africans, religion is not something that is separate. It's separate from your personal life. It's part and parcel of your life. You carry it with you wherever you go. So in terms of that, the difference was that we had to go to church on Sundays. Whereas for the African, religion was not attached to a particular structure. It's something that you live on a daily basis. You carry with you. But when I was in Cameroon, most of the services were modeled on the Western type of services. So we had about the same thing that we do here. Even the hymnals were about the same. So some of the songs we have in our hymnals, I remember them in my Presbyterian secondary school, that we used to sing some of the hymnals. So it's in terms of the structure, it's really not different from here. The only thing that might be different was that there, depending on where you went, the sermons tended to be long. They tended to be too long. I mean, I remember in secondary school there was one of the teachers who used to teach religion, and whenever he had to preach on Sundays, everybody was prepared to be in church for 2.5 hours, because his sermons would go on for 1.5 hours. People would doze off, get up, and he's still talking. So that's the difference that I see. Is here the sermons the services are structured in such a way that you go in for 1 hour to do almost everything. Whereas there it was stretched. There was no time limit. There was no time frame. The preaching was, of course, somewhat, it was contextualized. So it was done in the context of your local realities. So they will take a Bible study and then link it to your day-to-day life as you live in it. So in a sense, that was it. And I think the kind of thing, even what Pastor Strobel is doing also, is to make that kind of, to contextualize, to bring in things that are happening today on a daily basis, and bring to bear on her sermons. And that's what we're used to that in Cameroon. That the sermons were, yes, they'll go from the spiritual aspect of it, spiritual point, but at the same time, make a link to local realities. And that's what made religion, spiritual life much more active for us, because it was linked to your daily life.
I love that picture that you paint of faith formation carried wherever you go, and that it's part of everyday life and not just something we do for 1 or 2 hours on a Sunday. And so as you've traveled on through your life, part of the place where you carried that faith from early on in Cameroon became the state of Michigan. How did that come to be?
Well, the state of Michigan, my interest in the USA in general has been long-standing, and this is because of the many influences that I had. See, my oldest brother studied here in California at Pasadena. He studied in Pasadena at the Occidental College in California, in Pasadena, California. So when he came back home, he became a model. Because he said so much about the United States. But besides my older brother, who was my role model, there were also different things. We were taught by Peace Corps volunteers, so we're used to Americans. We used to listen to VOA, Voice of America, that would talk about a lot about America. So there were many different things to influence, to make us, to generate our interest in the US. But to be more specific, my interest in Michigan came during my sophomore year in college in Cameroon, we had a professor from Michigan State come to Cameroon to teach as a Fulbright scholar. His name is Kenneth Harrow, Dr. Kenneth Harrow. And he came to teach for 2 years. So he taught me my sophomore and my junior year. And he was the one who came to class and started talking about, why don't you guys think about continuing your studies in the USA instead of thinking just about France or England, as was the case. So he was the one who generated that interest. And as a result of that, I went to the American Cultural Center, which is attached to the US Embassy in Yaoundé, the capital. I went there and took up the book of American colleges and universities and just randomly selected some of the colleges and universities and applied to them. Applied. And to the first school to offer admission was the University of Michigan. And they offered me admission with tuition waiver. I mean, for an African, that was, but of course, so that was how I ended up in Michigan. And there's a longer story that I had to go through to get to Michigan, which we can talk about it another time, because it would take the whole day to tell you that story. But so that's how I ended up in Michigan. Another reason I ended up in Michigan is that when I got admission, because I got admission also to Pomona College in California, Yale University, but those came later. They came much later than the University of Michigan. I had already accepted, I'm going to Michigan. So when I took the map of Michigan, put it down, I saw that it was all blue, the Great Lakes. I said, yes, that reinforced my my desire to come to Michigan. But you know that this guy doesn't swim. So, so that was an irony that I was drawn here by water that is not my friend, that I don't swim. I don't swim. Yeah. So I got here August 25th, 1980, in the summer. So everything was hot, everything was good, bright sunshine. So I went through that on my short sleeve shirts till about November. And I'm sure some people who saw me in Ann Arbor at that time thought this guy was just crazy to be wearing a short sleeve shirt in November, no jacket, nothing. So on November 24th of that year, we went to bed. I didn't have a radio, I didn't have a TV, and I was living on a 9th floor apartment. So went to bed, and then in the morning, I got up, and to my greatest surprise and my shock, I looked through the window and everything down was white. So it had snowed at night, and I wasn't prepared for it. So I called my professor that morning and said, I'm not coming to class. He said, why? I said, there's some white stuff down there. I don't want to walk on it. So he said, I want to see you in class. So what I did was to borrow my roommate's shoes and jacket. And that was my introduction to winter. So how did when I came to Ann Arbor, another thing that we did was I became part of international students, international Christian group. It was something on campus. And so we'll meet every Friday, prayer, songs, have dinner, usually potluck, and so on. So I did that for all my stay in Ann Arbor. So that became part of my family there, because we met mostly international students. And then, of course, it was directed by an American couple. And then on Fridays, usually Friday nights, they will open their doors to us, for all of us to go there. And then people who could would bring food. And some of us who were broke, completely broke, didn't bring anything. So, so that's where my, my spiritual life, I shared that with different international students. And I was also with a family there, a family in Ann Arbor, who belonged to a Presbyterian church in Ann Arbor. So I used to go, from time to time, I'll go to church with them. So it's been, so my faith journey has been almost constant. That I've been, wherever I've been, I've tried to get myself into a situation where my spirituality will grow. And then when we came here, if I can just continue with that, when we came to East Lansing in 2000, I had a bad experience in Albion with going to church. So the bad experience was that I had someone came. I had a car, and someone asked me to go to church with them, to go from Albion to Jackson to church with them. So I said yes, and then I was single at the time. I wasn't married yet. So I said, okay, I will go. So he picked me up at about 8:30 in the morning to go to a church in Jackson. That's about 15 miles away. And for some reason, we didn't get back to my apartment till about 4:30. Till about 4:30 that day. I had not eaten. I had not had anything. So it didn't leave a good taste in my mouth, to say the least. So from that time on, I was a little bit, I withdrew from any church activities and so on, until when we moved to East Lansing then, or to Okemos, I continued with the same thing of being a little bit, lax about it. And it was my wife, who is originally Catholic. She started going to the Catholic church with the children. She started going to Catholic church with the children until about a year later, she comes and tells me, okay, children are going to be baptized Catholic. And I was, what? What are you saying? She said, they're going to baptize Catholic. I said, oh. So I said, so she gave me a choice. She said, or either they're baptized Catholic, or you look for a church where all of us as family will go to.
And
so that was the ultimatum.
And then you ended up visiting Eastminster for the first time. And what was your experience when you walked through the doors at Eastminster?
Exactly. I visited Eastminster for the first time. Again, I had already visited the Okemos Presbyterian, and the reception was not good at all. No one asked me where I came from, nothing. So when I came to Eastminster, and I came there by my own, I had not known about Eastminster from anyone at all. I just came in, and just the atmosphere, the welcoming nature of it. Everybody came, after service, asked me, where are you from? Where do you live? So it was that, that welcoming atmosphere that would care for you. All of that was what basically got me hooked on Eastminster. And it's been like that ever since. We started Eastminster in 2002. Until today, I still have that feeling that, that Eastminster is very welcoming. It's a very family-oriented place. And I usually can't wait till Sunday to go and meet with my church family. It's really something.
Well, Emmanuel, we are so glad that you are a part of that church family and at Eastminster, and that we have all of the Yewah family that's been part of this fabric of the church's life, and still to this day and beyond. I'm going to ask you an intentionally broad question as we wrap up our time together today, but is there a particular hope or prayer that you would like to offer in this particular time for either the church with a capital C, not necessarily specifically Eastminster, but the church or the world? What would you say?
I think at this what this pandemic has shown us is that every human being is powerless. We really don't have any power. We may be president, we may be everything, but what this pandemic has shown us is that a virus can make everybody powerless. And so the only power that we can rely on now is that spiritual power. It's God. And so my prayer is that even though we're going through all of this, my prayer is still that the spiritual aspect of this would prevail at some point. That yes, sometimes things happen for a purpose. I think what this has shown us is that we are all part of a human family, and that what goes on outside of the United States, we cannot just be complacent about what goes on outside of the United States, because we are all part of a big family. If something touches someone in Africa, in the end, it's going to touch someone in the USA. If something touches someone in China, as it's happened, in the end, it's going to touch all of us. And my prayer is that people should look broadly into the world. They should consider part of our common humanity. They should consider what makes us sane. They should consider that it's the same red blood that runs through all our veins. And one of the things that has also I've been concerned about is this question of hate. And I don't know how it ever came about, because it doesn't pay. What would someone say when in their last day of judgment they ask, what did you come to do on this earth? And you say, I came to hate people. I think this is the point where love should dominate, should take over, because with love, everything is possible. With love, we can see what all of us share. With love, we're part of a big family. That would be my prayer, that this pandemic brings us together, that we see our commonality rather than our differences. That would be my prayer. And I hope our Lord would grant us or grant me that wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you for that beautiful prayer. Thank you for sharing time with us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
You're welcome, Neil. Thank you.